We live in a world where facts are often tangled with fiction, especially when it comes to what we think we know about science. From health myths to misunderstandings about physics, many of the beliefs people accept as common knowledge are actually false or oversimplified. These misconceptions aren't just harmless trivia, they shape how we make decisions, from what we eat to how we understand the universe. And the problem is that they spread fast, thanks to textbooks, pop culture, and even outdated school lessons. This video is all about pulling apart those false beliefs using real science. We'll explore how these misconceptions formed in the first place, why they're so hard to kill, and what the actual science says. Whether it's the idea that we only use 10% of our brains or the belief that sugar causes hyperactivity in kids, you'll be surprised at how many facts you've accepted without question. And more importantly, you'll learn the truth behind them, backed by studies, experiments, and expert insight. So buckle up, because once we start debunking, it's hard to stop. You might start questioning everything you thought you knew. But that's a good thing. Because when you replace a myth with a fact, you're not just becoming smarter, you're becoming a better thinker. Let's decode the science behind the world's most persistent misconceptions. We only use 10% of our brain. One of the most widespread scientific myths is that humans only use 10% of their brain. This idea has been featured in countless movies, books, and motivational speeches, often implying that unlocking the other 90% could grant us superpowers. But neuroscience has thoroughly debunked this idea. Modern brain imaging techniques like fMRI and PET scans show that nearly every part of the brain is active at some point, even while resting. The origin of this myth is murky. It may have stemmed from misquotes or misinterpretations of early neurological research in the 19th and early 20th centuries. William James, a pioneering psychologist, once suggested that humans only meet a fraction of their full potential, not that we literally only use 10% of our brains. Over time, the quote was warped into a pseudo-scientific claim. Neurologists argue that the brain is highly efficient and energy-intensive, consuming about 20% of the body's energy. If 90% of it were inactive, it would be an evolutionary waste. Brain injuries that affect even small areas often result in noticeable impairments, which further proves that there is no large, unused portion. The 10% myth is not only false, it's also misleading, giving people the false hope that untapped powers are just waiting to be unlocked. Understanding how the brain truly functions is far more fascinating than the myth. Rather than looking for hidden mental reserves, science encourages us to focus on how neural networks, synaptic plasticity, and learning mechanisms shape our cognition. That reality is more empowering than any myth. Sugar makes kids hyperactive. Many parents swear that giving kids sugar turns them into hyperactive tornadoes. But numerous scientific studies have shown no causal link between sugar consumption and hyperactivity in children. This misconception likely persists because of confirmation bias. Adults expect sugar to cause chaos, so they notice hyperactivity after sugary treats, even if there's no connection. The myth gained momentum in the 1970s and 1980s when a few fringe studies suggested that food additives and sugars could affect behavior. However, controlled trials have consistently failed to support this claim. A 1995 meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American Medical Association concluded that sugar does not affect children's behavior or cognitive performance. What's really at play might be the context in which kids consume sugar. Think birthdays, Halloween, or holidays, times when excitement is already running high. These high-energy environments make it easy to misattribute natural kid enthusiasm to sugar. It's a classic case of correlation being mistaken for causation. Instead of fearing sugar as a behavioral trigger, the focus should shift to moderation and nutrition. Excessive sugar intake has genuine health implications, like obesity and dental problems, but hyperactivity isn't one of them. Knowing the science helps parents make better choices based on fact, not folklore. Hair and nails keep growing after death. It's a spooky thought. the idea that hair and nails continue to grow after someone dies. This misconception has appeared in horror stories and even forensic dramas, adding an eerie layer to the concept of death. But the truth is more mundane, and entirely scientific. After death, the body doesn't continue its biological growth processes. Instead, what appears to be growth is actually a dehydration effect. Here's what happens. As the body starts to dry out and decompose, the skin and soft tissues contract. This retraction pulls the skin away from the base of the nails and the hair follicles, making the nails and hair appear longer. It's an illusion, not actual growth. No metabolic activity continues in these tissues once the body has died because the cells responsible for growth stop functioning immediately. This myth likely persists because the visual effect is convincing to the casual observer. Additionally, historical practices like exhumation or the opening of tombs may have led to these mistaken beliefs. In pre-modern times, a lack of understanding about bodily decay helped fuel legends of vampires or other undead figures, further embedding the idea into cultural memory. Understanding this myth doesn't just clear up a misconception, it also underscores how scientific knowledge of biology and decomposition can separate fact from fear. In forensics and medicine, clearing up these kinds of misunderstandings is crucial for accurate public awareness and professional integrity. Goldfish have a 3-second memory. Goldfish have long been the butt of jokes about forgetfulness. The popular claim that goldfish have a memory span of just 3 seconds is not only wrong, it's wildly inaccurate. In reality, goldfish have been shown to retain memories for months, and they can even be trained to perform simple tasks, recognize patterns, and respond to routine stimuli. Studies in animal cognition have demonstrated that goldfish can learn to navigate mazes and anticipate feeding schedules. One experiment even showed that goldfish could be trained to press a lever for food at specific times of day, indicating a far more complex memory system than once believed. Their cognitive abilities are more comparable to those of other small vertebrates, not brainless automatons. The myth probably stems from anthropomorphic thinking and underestimation of animal intelligence. Since goldfish live in small bowls and appear to swim aimlessly, people assume they lack awareness. But this behavior says more about their environment than their brainpower. In fact, keeping a goldfish in a bowl can cause stress and reduce its cognitive abilities, which makes the myth a self-fulfilling prophecy in poor conditions. By debunking this misconception, we're reminded that intelligence and memory exist on a spectrum across the animal kingdom. Dismissing a creature's abilities due to outdated assumptions limits how we care for and interact with them. Even tiny fish deserve a little more respect than folklore has allowed. Vaccines cause autism. One of the most damaging and persistent modern misconceptions is the belief that vaccines cause autism. This myth originated from a now debunked and retracted study published in 1998 by Andrew Wakefield. His claims were not only unsupported by proper scientific methods, they were later exposed as fraudulent. Nonetheless, the myth spread rapidly, fueled by fear, misinformation, and social media. Since then, dozens of large-scale studies across the globe have confirmed that there is no link between vaccines and autism. Organizations such as the CDC, WHO, and countless peer-reviewed journals have consistently found no correlation. The ingredients in vaccines, including preservatives like thimerosal, have also been studied extensively and found to be safe in the quantities used. The damage caused by this myth is enormous. Vaccine hesitancy has led to the resurgence of diseases that were once nearly eradicated, such as measles. Public health experts emphasize that vaccines are one of the most effective tools in disease prevention. Refusing them not only endangers individual children but also weakens herd immunity for everyone. Understanding the science behind vaccines is essential for public trust. Education, transparency, and correcting misinformation are the keys to reversing the tide of skepticism. Myths may spread quickly, but the truth, when armed with data, can still catch up. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. It's a popular expression and a comforting thought. that lightning never strikes the same place twice. Unfortunately, it's completely false. Lightning can, and often does, strike the same place multiple times. In fact, tall structures like the Empire State Building are hit dozens of times per year. This myth likely arose from the randomness and drama associated with lightning strikes. Lightning is governed by principles of electrical discharge. It tends to hit the tallest, most conductive points in an area. That's why skyscrapers, radio towers, and trees on hills are frequent targets. Once a conductive path is established, it becomes even easier for lightning to strike that spot again. The saying has taken on a metaphorical life, often meaning that rare events don't happen twice. But in the literal, scientific sense, it's simply untrue. Misunderstanding the nature of lightning can even be dangerous, as it might lead someone to underestimate risk during a storm. To stay safe, it's important to understand real lightning behavior. Avoid open fields, water, and metal objects during a thunderstorm, and seek shelter in a grounded building or a car. The more we understand about natural phenomena, the better we can protect ourselves from them, without relying on cliches. Bats are blind. The phrase, blind as a bat, has been misleading people for centuries. In reality, bats are not blind at all. Most bats have perfectly functional eyes, and many species even have good night vision. Some fruit bats can see just as well as humans during the day. The origin of this myth likely stems from bats' heavy reliance on echolocation, which people assume replaces vision. Echolocation is an advanced sensory system that allows bats to emit high-frequency sounds and interpret the returning echoes to locate prey and navigate in the dark. But this doesn't mean they lack eyesight. It means they have an extra tool that humans don't. In fact, some bats rely more on vision than echolocation, especially in well-lit environments. The misconception that bats are blind has perpetuated unfair portrayals of them as mysterious or eerie. But bats are actually one of nature's most sophisticated hunters. Their ability to combine sound and sight makes them incredibly effective in their ecosystems. Misunderstanding this fact can lead to unnecessary fear and even mistreatment of these animals. Learning the truth about bats helps us appreciate them not as creepy creatures, but as vital players in controlling insect populations and pollinating plants. The real science is far more interesting than the myth. You swallow 8 spiders a year in your sleep. This widely shared fact is almost always met with disgust and relief when people learn it's not true. The claim that humans swallow an average of 8 spiders per year in their sleep is completely unfounded. There's no scientific study or credible report that supports it. In fact, it's more of an internet hoax than a legitimate biological claim. The myth likely gained traction because it plays on deep-seated fears of insects and the unknown. However, spider behavior makes the claim implausible. Spiders are highly sensitive to vibrations, and a sleeping human creates enough disturbance through breathing, snoring, and movement to keep them away. Spiders don't crawl into people's mouths because it's not a natural habitat for them. Experts in arachnology have repeatedly debunked this myth. According to entomologists, it's extremely unlikely that a spider would approach a warm, wet, moving cavity like a human mouth. There's no evolutionary incentive for a spider to explore that space, and certainly no reason to believe it happens on a regular basis. Understanding how myths spread, especially through email chains, memes, and social media, can help us be more skeptical of shock value trivia. Sometimes, a myth spreads simply because it's too gross or weird not to repeat. But that doesn't make it true. Seasons are caused by Earth's distance from the Sun. It seems logical. Summer must occur when the Earth is closer to the Sun, and winter when it's farther away. But the seasons are not caused by the Earth's proximity to the Sun. They're caused by the tilt of the Earth's axis. This axial tilt of about 23.5 degrees results in different parts of the Earth receiving varying amounts of sunlight throughout the year. When the northern hemisphere is tilted toward the Sun, it experiences summer because sunlight hits more directly and lasts longer throughout the day. At the same time, the southern hemisphere is tilted away and experiences winter. 6 months later, the situation is reversed. The Earth's orbit is slightly elliptical, but this variation in distance is too small to explain the seasons. The misconception likely comes from a lack of understanding of orbital mechanics and geometry. It's one of those explanations that feels intuitively right but collapses under scrutiny. Teachers and educational media have worked hard to correct this over the years, but the myth still persists in popular culture. Knowing how seasons actually work is crucial to understanding climate, agriculture, and global weather patterns. It's another example of how a deeper dive into science can completely change your perspective on something you thought you already knew. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. Parents and teachers have warned for generations that cracking your knuckles will lead to arthritis. The sound may be unpleasant, but research shows that there's no connection between knuckle cracking and the development of arthritis. The cracking noise is caused by gas bubbles rapidly collapsing in the synovial fluid that lubricates joints, not by bones grinding together. Multiple studies, including one famous self-study by Dr. Donald Unger, who cracked the knuckles on one hand for over 60 years and left the other untouched, found no difference in arthritis levels between the two. Larger-scale studies have reached similar conclusions. Cracking your knuckles may cause minor irritation or reduced grip strength, but not arthritis. The myth probably persists because it sounds plausible and involves a noticeable, sometimes annoying sound. It's often passed down as common sense wisdom without scientific backing. Like many health myths, it thrives in environments where authoritative-sounding statements go unchallenged. Understanding joint health requires real medical knowledge, not folk advice. While it's still a good idea to be gentle with your joints, cracking your knuckles isn't the harmful habit it's been made out to be. Once again, science gives us the tools to separate myth from reality. These 10 examples are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the myths we carry around in our minds. What makes misconceptions so powerful is that they often feel right, even when they're dead wrong. They're passed down through generations, reinforced by media, and rarely questioned. But once we start unraveling them, the truth becomes hard to ignore, and even more fascinating than the fiction. By understanding the real science behind these common beliefs, we don't just correct our knowledge. We train our brains to be more curious, skeptical, and analytical. That's a skill that benefits us far beyond trivia night. It changes how we think about health, nature, education, and even each other. Facts might not be as flashy as myths, but they have the power to shape a smarter, more thoughtful world. So the next time you hear a claim that sounds too simple to be true, take a moment to question it. Science isn't about knowing everything, it's about never stopping the search for what's real. And sometimes, the first step toward the truth is letting go of what you thought you knew.